Small bit of housekeeping before the video proper starts. The next video, that is next week's one, is going to be a pilot episode for the Xenogears recap stuff. Now I know that there are plot recaps that exist and some of them seem pretty good, but I'd want to go into more detail than those because if I say want to do an in-depth analysis of a minor character, you're not going to know anything I'm talking about if you just saw an overall general thing. So this first one is probably going to be relatively short, only focusing on a few hours of gameplay, and it's going to be a lot of feedback taking, trying to figure out exactly how long and how much of the game you want me to cover in each video. Also, I might skip a week, the week after next, just because I'll be on vacation and I have no idea if I'll be able to actually finish another video in time. If I do, that video might very well be the Rex vs. Cross vs. Shulk 10k special, but if I don't expect that video to be the next one I make after I come back. So it's a bit of a weird thing there. But yeah. Also, this video will contain spoilers for, let's just say all of Xenoblade 1, because close enough. There are a lot of well-loved minor characters in Xenoblade 1, but from what I know, Kallian isn't frequently talked about. Everyone agrees that he's a great character or a cool dude, but the discussion about him doesn't seem to happen as often as more popular or more comedic people, so I'm going to describe the very unfortunate circumstances that are this man's life. We all know the tragedy that is his younger half-sister, but in reality, it's Kallian's work behind the scenes supporting her that prevents Melia's story from having an even worse ending. Kallian was born not to the second consort as Melia was, but to Yumea, the first consort to Empress Soria and Antiqua. This means that he is a full-blooded High Entia, as opposed to Melia's half-Hommed nature. He was also born well over a half-century earlier than her, being 151 during the game as opposed to her 88. Doesn't really mean anything overall towards the plot or anything related to his character, but Kallian is probably around the age of Melia's grandmother on her Homs side, which just goes to show the vastly different timelines on which the Homs and the High Entia live. This isn't really an important thing to the game itself, but if we're talking about backstory, it is kind of interesting, and the fact that Melia is that much younger than him might play things into consideration about his character and how much he wants to protect her. Unlike his sister, he became very, very aware of the ultimate fate of his race, and knew exactly why the two consort system existed, to ensure leadership of the High Entia would persist after the inevitable transformation of the purebloods into Telethia. It's very likely that this is the reason he had no qualms with leaving his position in the line of succession to Melia, and not due to her being a more capable leader, because they're both shown to be very competent in that regard. Just as a side note in the whole half-Homs versus pureblood High Entia thing, the simulated ancestor in the High Entia tomb says that Melia has Homs gene integration of 80%, which is well above the 50 she'd have if she were the child of a pure Homs and pure High Entia. Either that or it's just using a completely different metric than actual amount of DNA. But since the surviving Homs during the game only know the High Entia as a myth, and have recently had contact with the rest of the Homs settlements across Bionis because of the war a year ago, even if those were later wiped out, it's likely that the group of Homs the second consorts come from aren't pure blood and are instead part High Entia or descended from them in some way, with the ratio skewing more on the Homs side, or that the royal family is already part Homs, just not enough to avoid the Telethia transformation. Kallian is first seen in the flesh when the party arrives in Alchemoth, appearing alongside his father when Melia debriefs him on her mission to Machna. He shows a bit of his knowledge about the past by explaining the Monado legend according to the High Entia, then reveals to Melia that she was named Crown Princess, an act with which he agreed. He also attempts to instill confidence in her when she questions her ability to lead due to the deaths of her bodyguards, saying the usual supportive big brother type thing there. A bit later, in a scene none of the party is privy to, Alvis gives his report on events, which leads Saurian to believe that the Bionis is soon to reawaken, something he doesn't seem surprised about. It's likely that through a combination of monitoring ether output of Alchemoth and the High Entia Empire, as well as Alvis's visions, he was already kind of guessing that the time of the High Entia was coming to a close, which is why he chose to name Melia as his successor instead of Kallian, because he figured it was time for the High Entia to transform, and there needed to be some sort of leadership. It's also likely that Kallian was privy to discussions about this, or something like this, at least some kind of conversation, that got him on board with that idea as well. He does show concern for his sister, as he tries to convince the Emperor to handwave some of the formalities of the investiture ceremony, giving her official title as Crown Princess, but is shot down by his own mother, who suggests the trial of the tomb as a way to instantly gain trust from the populace. He's of course opposed to the danger, but is overruled by Saurian, which leads directly into a vision Shulk has of Melia getting attacked by Tyrea and her Telethia, which were of course planted by the First Consort and the Bionite Order. This brings up the very, very unfortunate conflict in that Yumea, in her fanatical devotion to the Bionis, is unwilling to accept a mixed-race High-Entia to sit on the throne, and presumably wants to place Kallian there, make him back in the line of succession, because he is a pureblood. And yet, Kallian, her own son, actually wants Melia to succeed to the throne, probably because he has some sort of knowledge that the time to turn into Telethia has come, and the High-Entia need a leader who won't fall there. He doesn't seem to think the Order is real, he considers it a myth, which just goes to show all the subterfuge going on there, but thankfully he does not find out that it's his own mother that's fighting against him here. After that, Dunban gets a pretty amazing twofer, because after his room service line, which might very well be the best one in the entire series, it's his job to convince Kallian of the vision and let the party into the tomb to save Melia. Kallian actually knows who Dunban is, which is kind of interesting, but not too surprising because he knows the Monado legend. It's likely that he researches stuff and uncovered things about the Homs and their heroes. He also apologizes for the High-Entia not taking any role in the war against the Mechon a year ago, which Dunban does forgive him for, probably on the grounds that the High-Entia weren't affected by it, and that they probably have affairs that the Homs can't even imagine, but it might just be a show of goodwill, I'm not sure. He does, though, put the rules before emotions, trying to keep everyone from going to save Melia, but it doesn't take much convincing of a loophole to let them go, which does make sense because her safety is clearly and has clearly always been his priority, and of course because he was against that plan in the first place. All's well that ends well for this arc, except not really, because during the very ceremony celebrating Melia's clearing of the trial, the Mechon attack, which leads right into yet another Shulk vision, this one predicting the death of the Emperor himself. This time, despite a vision already having come true the same day, Kallian pushes back a lot harder to keep the party from going, but with Melia around insisting, he still capitulates. It's very likely that he was just trying to keep the party out of danger this time, because him and his father definitely had an understanding that this was the job of the Emperor to make this sacrifice to unleash whatever was sealed in Prison Island, and Kallian didn't realize that Shulk kind of had to be there for the shackles to be released, and just didn't want the party in danger. He wanted to keep the lives lost just to the Emperor. He seems to take his father's death pretty well, probably since he'd been told a day like this would come, and introduces his main contribution to the rest of the plot, the united force of all Bionis. Even though he's not the High-Entia royalty, bred specifically to bridge the gap with the rest of Bionis, he's still willing to put it all together just so Melia is free to travel with the party. This also marks his shift from only following the word of the rules to basically using his power to make new ones if needed to do the right thing. This is obviously just character development after seeing that the party was able to get around the rules and do great things with that, but it also shows that he is one of the first characters to seize their own destiny and make a future for themselves. He is one of the first to realize the main theme of the game and the thing that pretty much all the other characters end up doing before they win in the end. It's thanks to his efforts that Bionis was safe after the Monado got sent away, and that the party wasn't immediately bum-rushed by Egil's entire force since it was held up in Sword Valley. Something that's very, very ambiguous and probably not true at all that could have contributed to Kallian's change is that Saurian might have been able to be saved if he'd let the party go immediately and not held things up, but that's probably unlikely because the whole reason he died was because no one was strong enough to fight off the Mechon there, and the shackles weren't released until after then, so that probably doesn't change anything. But what does change things is the events after Mechonis Core. Kallian basically sacrificed his title and his life to support his father and sister, knowing full well he'd become a Telethia someday, and this is where that finally comes to pass. He's betrayed not only by his seemingly closest allies, but by the very Bionis he sought to protect. It's worth noting that his Telethia form, as well as some of the ones that form with him, although those are never fought, are fused with the Havres they were piloting. The Havres were designed by Lorthia's Ministry of Research, so it's very possible that they were designed intentionally to do that and produce a better and more powerful Telethia, which is backed up by the fact that Kallian is one of the strongest Telethia in the game, although this might just be because he has such a strong will that he retains some sort of sentience and even some sort of control, but that just makes it worse, because he retains his mind while he watches his entire work crumble before him, while Melia is also there, incapable of doing anything about it. He actually knows what happens to everyone. A lot of the Telethia you see, and you can fight in side quests in order to put them out of their misery at the behest of the old Telethia's friends as a high Entia, seem to retain some sort of knowledge of their past life, but they don't seem to be sentient, while Kallian probably does lose his control, but retains his mind and is able to be in control of his Telethia body for a while, but even then he can't successfully kamikaze Lorithia, and somehow gets completely captured, and she grafts herself to him later on when she tries to fight the party. I don't know if Lorithia kissing him before transforming was just to screw with Melia, because she actually had some sort of feelings for him, or it was some sort of paying respects to the pure vessel of her god in the Bionis, but it is still, of course, very messed up, especially if you consider the fact that Kallian might have retained his consciousness, just not his self-control, which means that she not only forcibly kissed him, but forcibly fused with him against his will, meaning that yes, Lorithia is an even more terrible person than you originally thought. The goodbye scene after Lorithia is killed is fairly uplifting for Melia and does pose a decent end to her character arc, but it's of course awful for Kallian. Yeah, he probably knew that he was going to die some way like this, just without the humiliation of losing his entire people and getting used as a tool to try and kill his own sister, but he doesn't get to say everything he wanted to, only focusing on duty as a leader of the High Entia more than anything. Gives hope for the future, but he doesn't really get to say goodbye to Melia as her brother, and doesn't even get to see the ultimate success of the party, knowing that she did actually succeed and fulfill both his and their father's legacy. Kallian's entire story is a classical tragedy. He's born with it all, but despite his hard work and genuine skill, is plagued by evil his entire life, and never really gets anywhere despite everything. He's so devoted to his sister that he'll ignore the rest of the world to keep her safe, but she ended up saving him from himself. He had big ideas, and one of them did pan out in the long term, but was eventually turned completely against him, and he very nearly became a tool used to hurt the one he sought most to protect. In the end, he was able to succeed, but of course died as a result. He's able to pass his legacy and hope on to the next generation, but won't be around to see their triumphs. He's the man behind the curtain of the hope of the High Entia, and one who deserves more praise and awareness to his tragedy. And that's it for this video. I recorded it at a very different time than I usually do, so in addition to this being a much darker in tone thing, that probably accounts for why my commentary seemed different. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say because I said all the important stuff at the beginning. There's going to be a video next week. It's probably not going to be a video the week after that, but if there is, it's going to be the big one. And then I'm going to get back into normal videos. I'm going to try to start streaming Golden Sun and recording Let's Plays once I'm back from vacation. And also, yes, the 10K special is coming relatively soon, even if it doesn't come 2 weeks from now. I'm rambling, I'm repeating myself, and until next time, this is Luxin, signing off.